The air in the living room turned ice cold the second Ethan slid that pristine white envelope across the polished mahogany table. Christmas music was still playing softly in the background, but nobody was listening anymore. My daughter looked down at the paper, then back up at me, her face completely pale. Ethan just leaned back in his chair with a calm, satisfied smile, convinced he had completely controlled the room. I picked up the envelope and opened it without saying a single word. Inside was a thick prenuptial agreement designed to protect every dime of Ethan's family wealth while treating my daughter like someone who brought nothing to the table. Ethan gave a slight laugh and told me he was sure I understood why this was necessary, especially since people on a fixed income usually struggled to grasp modern asset protection. I just nodded and kept reading. What Ethan and his parents did not realize was that they were making massive assumptions based on my appearance. I was 72 years old, driving a 20-year-old pickup truck, and wearing an old winter coat with a hand-repaired sleeve. To them, I was just another struggling retiree trying to stretch a modest pension. But appearances can be incredibly deceiving, and my late wife always told me that if you really want to know a person's true character, you let them believe you have absolutely nothing. The truth was that I had spent nearly 4 decades serving in the United States Army, eventually retiring as a 4-star general. My military pension alone brought in over $28,000 every single month, my home was long paid off, and the investment portfolio my wife and I built over decades was worth millions. I lived simply because I valued things that actually mattered, not because I lacked resources. Over the past year, I had watched Ethan slowly change as his commercial real estate business grew. He started judging people by the watches they wore, the cars they drove, and the size of their bank accounts. He was never openly cruel, but he was constantly condescending toward me, frequently dropping subtle comments about how sad it was when older people failed to plan for their financial futures. I had deliberately worn my oldest coat to Christmas dinner that evening just to observe how his family would treat me. Throughout the meal, Ethan and his mother made polite, pitying comments about my lifestyle, assuming I was barely getting by. I never bothered to correct them because I wanted to see who Ethan truly was when he thought no one was watching. When the prenuptial agreement came out after dinner, the entire room went silent. The legal document explicitly listed my daughter's financial standing as minimal and assumed she was entering the marriage with almost zero backing. Ethan looked at me with a polite smile, explaining that his parents worked hard for their money and needed to ensure their family assets remained protected from outsiders. I carefully closed the folder and looked directly at Ethan. I asked him very calmly what exactly he thought my daughter was bringing into this marriage, and he casually replied that everybody knew my family did not have much to protect. His mother nodded along, offering a sympathetic look that was meant to be comforting but felt entirely patronizing. That was the exact moment I reached into the inner pocket of my worn jacket. Instead of arguing, I pulled out a small leather document holder that contained my official military credentials, financial statements, and estate documents. I placed my papers directly beside his legal envelope on the oak table and invited Ethan's father to take a look. Ethan's father, who had been quiet and observant all evening, slowly picked up my file. As he flipped through the pages, his expression shifted from curiosity to utter shock. He stared at the 4-star military documentation, the pension statements, and the trust setup that dwarfed his own family's holdings by a wide margin. The silence in the room became absolute. Ethan looked back and forth between his father and me, clearly confused by his father's sudden loss of composure. His father lowered the papers, looked at his son with deep embarrassment, and quietly explained that the man sitting across from them was a retired 4-star general with resources far exceeding their own. Ethan's confident smile completely vanished in an instant. I looked at Ethan and gently explained that true financial protection went both ways, but more importantly, real character was never defined by a bank account. I told him that my daughter was coming into this marriage fully supported, but if he measured people solely by their net worth, he was entirely unprepared for the real world. Ethan stammered, trying to find words to apologize, but the damage was already done. My daughter finally saw Ethan for who he truly was, a man whose respect was conditioned entirely on perceived wealth. She quietly removed her engagement ring, placed it on top of the legal papers, and thanked his family for a very revealing Christmas dinner. We walked out into the cold night together, leaving behind an extremely quiet house and a young man who had just learned a lesson he would never forget. Would you like me to adjust the narrative pacing or heighten the tension in the final confrontation scene for your script?